My grandmother taught me something so important that it stays with me to this day. Is like she taught me how to understand that I was the most special person in the world. Like I was gonna be the one to change the way we live, to make history. But she did so without making me feel entitled. So I have like a balance. And I saw a quote just before we got here uh, on this call that says, "Enlightenment is when a wave realizes that it's the ocean."
Mm.
And that resonates with me because that's what my grandmother taught me. She taught me that I was going to be the person to change things, but at the same time, I'm not better than anybody.
Hey, Common Sister, thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Give us some little love and support, okay? Today, we have the pleasure of taking you to the East Coast where we are interviewing one of the most busiest men in show business. He is an entrepreneur, a socialpreneur. He is a preneur of every kind. Not to mention, he's an artist in his own right. So please help me welcome George Urban Jibaro Torres.
Epa.
All right, Wepa, my Wepa
Uh,
man. How you doing, George?
I'm doing amazing, and I
Good.
thank you for that beautiful intro. And I think a lot of people forget sometimes that I'm an artist.
Yes.
So it never comes up in interviews. That people don't ever talk about the artistic piece of it, but that's who I am at my core. So thank you for acknowledging that.
Oh, you're welcome. So the first thing I want to find out is how did you get the name Urban Jibaro?
Oh wow. So that's a deep story. Unfortunately, in 1985, I was a victim of a very horrific racial incident where
Oh,
me and a Dominican friend of mine were attacked in Howard Beach, Queens, the same night that Michael Griffith from the infamous Howard Beach incident got killed, just
wow.
blocks away. And as a result of all the legal proceedings and the things necessary to try to prosecute my attackers, I came in contact with a bunch of young lords, but specifically Richie Perez, who who was my mentor. He stepped in to help us with the legal proceedings and took me under his wing and taught me all about self determination and all the different things that make the Young Lords Party, uh, icons in our community. And one day at a college, I was probably 16, 17 years old, speaking at a college about what happened to me. And something about the way I expressed myself made him turn around, just put his arm around me, and walk me out of the room and say, "Tú eres un urban híbaro, like you're the best of both worlds." And that always stuck with me. I wrote poetry about it. I talked about it. I have small narratives about that moment, and eventually he ended up passing away in March of 20, 2004. He ended up passing away, and I ended up taking on the name as a kind of my tribute to him and
Oh,
my grandmother and to everybody who made me who I am today. So I kind of took the name on. So I went from being a poet named El Renacido, which was my a name that I picked up in college as a poet, to switching to Urban Hibaro as a brand, um, to kind of like really pay homage to him every single time I spoke.
now what got you into poetry?
What got me into poetry was I uh, I read Down These Mean Streets by Piri Tomas. It was given to me as I went into college as something that I should read, like required reading if you're going to be a Latino at the SUNY Westbury campus. I read Thomas's book, and I there's very few times in my life where I've seen art reflect my reality in a sense, right? To see the things that I've seen in the streets and the things I saw in my community. And there's only a few times that that's ever happened. It happened when I saw Beach Street, the movie. Uh, it happened when I read a book called Wilding in the South Bronx, and then Piri Tomas's book, of course. And when I read the book, I reached out to Piri and tried to get him to come to a conference at Westbury, and we managed to make that happen. And I got to meet him and spend a lot of time with him because I was handling him as we were working the conference, and we became pen pals. We started writing each other like actual letters, and I would write to Petey and keep in touch with him. And then the internet age stepped in, and when MySpace and all that happened, we reconnected, and I got to bring him out to a show that I do in Brooklyn called Capicu. Uh, and that performance would actually be his last performance
Oh
alive.
wow.
He performed for us a beautiful night of poetry. And then just a couple of weeks after that, he fell ill, and for like 2 years he was out of commission, and then he eventually passed on.
So
Um,
for those who don't know who Perry Thomas is, and Down These Mean Streets is one of the greatest books that reflect Spanish Harlem in the 50s. I mean, exactly what was going on. I that was the first book that I read when I was in eighth grade that reflected back to me who, where I came from. I knew those
Absolutely.
people. I knew all those people. They were down the street. They were, in my building. They were all over the place. But he really did that. That is really one of our treasures. That book is one of Puerto Rican, New Yorkers, I should say. It's one of New Yorkers' treasures. That we own that book. That book describes who we are as a people in New York during the 50s and even the 60s and even going into the 70s. So I just
And
wanted to.
it also has a very deep juxtaposition with Afro-Latino, which has just reemerged as a conversation, right? Like, where's all the Afro-Latino literature and culture and whatnot, and it seems to be hidden in the streets and in the open mics or whatnot. But that definitely was one of the first exposures I ever had to somebody being both black and Latino in literature. So it was very, very interesting in all different respects.
Yeah, it was
For
the
me.
brown version of Man Child in the Promised Land, to
Yeah,
to
well,
put
that's a
it.
great, that's a
You
great
know,
yes.
so in college, you really started to become active and really started finding your way. Take us through a little bit of that journey.
So college was interesting for me because I started at the age of 25. I was already divorced, parent of two. I have two children at the time. My kids actually snuck into my dorm, and they stayed with me on the days that I had during custody. So the days that they stayed with me, they kind of lived with me in the dorm, which probably wasn't the safest thing to do, but it was what was necessary, right? I had some of my friends from different sororities babysit my kids while I went to class, and it was we worked it out, right? But I came in this really like hardcore wannabe activist. I was in the streets for a while, so going to college was a big shift for me. Um, I came in as an activist. I came in knowing that, or feeling like I knew just as much, if not more, than most of the students in the school because of my age and because of my exposure to the young lords and some other street organizations that were trying to make some moves at the time. And I came in with this desire to teach, and to also to learn, to learn what was happening and to get to the other side, so to speak, right? To get out of the hood. Um,
What was the
so I
main
came in,
cat? What was the main catalyst that sent you to school?
what sent me to school was divorce, really. I mean, I worked as a chef for Marriott, so I had a really good job. I found out that Marriott was gonna sell, that they were entertaining an offer from another company, and based on the history of those types of companies, of food service companies, I knew that we were gonna get fired and then get rehired back at half the rate. And I couldn't afford at that point with a family of four. I couldn't afford to take that pay cut. Um, and then just a lot of problems, obviously, at home with my marriage, me working a lot and her taking care of the kids. It just didn't work. We were a very young couple. Um, Eventually, I just ended up getting divorced and then deciding that that I needed to get back to school. So the girl that I was dating at the time, her name is Myrna Noble. She was just like very encouraging. She was just like, "You could do this. Like, you're smarter. You're just as smart, or if not smarter, than most of the people at school. You could do this. We could help. We could find money for you and whatever." And she just like literally took my hand and walked me through the process of getting into the EOP program and into Old Westbury. And then because she had such a great nurturing network, I kind of inherited that. So even after we broke up, I had this whole new family at school, including my fraternity brothers, So it was a very big shift, very fast. But one of the things that I'm very grateful for is that I had a ton of really positive role models around me that my kids were exposed to. My kids were like they literally grew up the first couple of years in college, of the years that there were formative years. So they got a chance to see like fraternal life. They got a chance to see Alianza Latina. They got a chance to see African People's Organization. My kids are mixed. My kids are half black and half Latino. They're Piri Thomas, right? Negrito, right? Um, so it was very interesting to have them come up as young kids, really kind of being exposed to so much positivity. I'm really grateful for that.
And then when you, so now you're in school, you're making it work as a single dad, you're making it work as a college student, and you started getting involved in the organizations.
Yes.
what what made you uh, um, gravitate to that?
My grandmother. I mean, my grandmother is really the source of all of this. My time with her in the kitchen, talking about how she used to community build. My grandmother was a social worker that actually was the founding director of Meals on Wheels in North Brooklyn, Brownsville,
Wow.
East New York. So I used to spend a lot of time with my grandmother out in the community, and I saw the level of compassion that she had towards humans. Like, it didn't matter what color you were, it didn't matter if you were gay, non binary, trans, it didn't matter. My grandmother was just loving to everybody. And her, how she built relationships was around meals, right? She was a great cook and she loved to bring people food. She loved to feed people. Meals on Wheels being her job, like that, everything was about feeding people and having that be the first step to humanizing them enough to be able to have a conversation about how they could solve whatever situations they were living at the time. So I always joke around when I do my keynotes and I say that my family could have invented some of the top billion-dollar companies in the world, right? Twitter was the viejitas in the window with a pillow talking to each other, playing the bochinche in the hood. Airbnb was our house because my house was literally a gateway for anybody from Puerto Rico or any other part of the country in my family that wanted to come to New York to make it happen. They came to our house and they stayed with us before they went on their own, right? So I was used to having dinner with different people and even strangers on a regular basis. Um, my grandmother taught me something so important that it stays with me to this day is like she taught me how to understand that I was the most special person in the world. Like I was going to be the one to change the way we live, to make history. But she did so without making me feel entitled. So I have like a balance. And I saw a quote just before we got here uh, on this call that says, enlightenment is when a wave realizes that it's the ocean.
Mm.
And that resonates with me because that's what my grandmother taught me. She taught me that I was going to be the person to change things, but at the same time, I'm not better than anybody. Que todavía me pongo los pantalones un pie a la vez, you know. So
I
that's
still
that's
put
that's
my pants on one leg at a time. That's right.
absolutely,
That's right.
absolutely.
And so, was she the one that taught you how to cook? Because you said you were a chef at
Yeah,
Marriott.
I was a chef at the Marriott. My grandmother did teach me how to cook. I didn't learn a whole lot of Spanish food, but I did get really the first place that I actually cooked that was a small restaurant in Queens called London Lenny's, and I learned how to cook seafood. So I was really big with Italian food, pasta, Canadian cuisine. Like for some reason, I got really into seafood. Um, Now I'm actually spending time with my mom and trying to get the recipes from the family and trying to get those things tightened up or whatever because I'm not a cook anymore. But now I have to cook for
Well,
myself
let
because
me
I'm a
let me
single dad.
correct you. Once a cook, always a cook.
Yeah, I know, but it's different. Like now, it's different for me because I'm actually learning the recipes that were passed down to my family,
Okay.
as opposed to just being a generic cook cooking recipes that I learned in books and whatnot. So now with mommy, every time I spend time with mommy, I actually go in the kitchen with her and hang out, and I do a lot of recording. My family's kind of used to that. I document a lot of stuff,
Uh
so
huh.
I have a lot of videos of my grandmother singing in Mi Viejo San Juan while she's making me food and stuff like that. So I'm doing the same thing with mommy. Mommy loves the camera. She's like a little TikTok superstar.
Well, as I was researching for our interview today, I found a video of you teaching how to make uh, um, a jibarito
Jibarito
sandwich,
sandwich. Yes.
jibarito sandwich. Yes, I can't wait to try it. It looked
I
delicious.
learned the jibarito sandwich from a guy named Jose, who is one of the originators of it. The most popular person that makes them in Chicago, over there by Humboldt Park. Um, I was traveling to Chicago with a friend named Dulce Ramos, who owned a business, and she's a real estate broker in Chicago. Her family has historical ties to the community, so she's taking me for a tour. So she takes me to go meet this guy, and the guy says, "Oh, you're sofritoforyoursoul.com," and he invites me into the kitchen, and he actually teaches me how to make the sandwich. So I asked him permission. I kind of had that old tribal Taino in me, right? That I had to ask permission to be able to share something.
Oh,
So I
absolutely.
asked him for permission, and I made a YouTube video that went pretty viral. Uh, and I made it with a little bit of beer. I put cerveza in that mix.
Oh, I didn't see that, but I saw you with someone making the sandwich, and you
Oh,
put
so there's
sofrito.
multiple videos. There's
Yeah,
multiple videos,
yes,
but
you.
The one with Papo is the one where we put beer in it.
Oh, okay. Then I'll go
We did
looking
the
for it.
Peruvian thing. We did the Peruvian thing and added some cerveza to
Oh,
it.